welcome to Daily Debrief from People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya and today we talk about a new president in Sri Lanka, heat waves in Europe and why Turkey walked out of the Istanbul Conference. Let's start with Sri Lanka. Sri Lankans hoped for change when thousands began protests against their government in March, but it seems they've got more of the same. The country has a new president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, but he is backed by ex-president Gotabaya Rajapaksa's party, among others. Sri Lankans are still tremendously angry over skyrocketing prices and unavailable essentials. Rajapaksa fled the country in July and protesters camped in his official residence for days. But the new president, as Prime Minister, had pursued policies very similar to Rajapaksa's. Let's talk to Prashant from People's Dispatch about these developments. Prashant, so how did a pillar of the establishment end up in the top post again?
Right, it's been a remarkable series of events because we know that, in May, Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed the Prime Minister by Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Now, Ranil Wickremesinghe was the only member of his party in Parliament. And that too, he had lost the election. He came back as part of the national list. So it was not that he had any kind of legitimacy at all as a popular political leader from the country to, become the prime minister. He was very clearly seen as a part of the Rajapaksa establishment. Although these two have been rivals, political rivals for a long time, there is also a history of collaboration between them, as happens in many other countries. So there have been, for instance, reports that Ranil Wickremesinghe protected the Rajapaksa family from prosecution last time he was prime minister, after the 2015 elections, for instance. So from the very beginning, the protesters in Sri Lanka, the huge number of protesters, saw Ranil as basically an extension of the Rajapaksa agenda. So it was not that he was seen as an independent candidate in any sense. Right, and if you look at the protests, it is not that after Ranil became the Prime Minister in May, there was any decrease in protests, so people were happy that, okay, finally a new person has come to power. The protests continued, there was no letdown in the agitations, and his policy prescriptions after that did not inspire any particular kind of confidence in the people at all.
Right.
So this was a situation in which we know, of course, on the 9th of July, there was massive protests. Again, important to note that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's office for residence and office and all were occupied. The Prime Minister's residence was also targeted. So it is again, he was also very much a target of this protest and the popular anger. So after Rajapaksa sort of fled and then resigned, then the question came as to who would become the next president. And so there were three candidates basically. Anurag Disnaike, who was more of a left-wing candidate, but it is quite sure that he would not get the number of seats. So it is basically between two candidates, both of the ruling establishment, still controlled by the Rajapaksas. It's important to note that although the Rajapaksas have disappeared from the political spectrum on the face of it, their influence very much remains. So really the question was that the SLPP, which is the Rajapaksas party, which way would it swing? It obviously split, but it does look like a majority of them supported Ranil. So what we now see is Ranil Wickremesinghe getting the parliamentary mandate to become the president. But the real question is that does he enjoy the confidence of the people? The answer to that definitely is a huge no, because even the immediate responses after his winning the election show that people, leaders of the protest movement, for instance, have said that they're not happy with this decision. Right. And none of his policies have really caught the people's imagination in any sense, or given people a sense of hope or confidence of any sort. So right now it's another very crucial moment here, because a lot depends, for instance, on what both sides are going to do. We know that the protesters are likely to escalate, or they might want to escalate the protests. On the other hand, Ranil Wickremesinghe might, now that he has the full mandate of Parliament to become president, whether he might go for another round of repression is really a big question. And if he does, will that backfire is the second question that really is before the people of Sri Lanka right now. So both sides there's a very delicate balance right now. But one thing I think we can all sort of conclude is that Ranil does not really bring anything new to the table. He was touted as someone with international connections, who could bring in money, who could bring in aid and sort of stabilize the situation. None of that clearly has materialized, because aid and assistance does not just come because you're friends with X, Y, or Z, or you have connections in X, Y, or Z country. There are structural issues to the Sri Lankan economy which cannot be resolved that easily. So keeping all these things in mind, very complicated and difficult situation for Sri Lanka ahead. There was a window which after July the 9th, now whether that window might open further after mass protests or whether it will close with this election is really a key question.
Right, Prashant, but the task for him is cut out. Does he have the mandate to perform those things that he has to?
Right, so which is what I mean. Like I said, he has a parliamentary mandate, maybe, so to speak. But sections of the opposition, activists, for instance, already, like I said, very unhappy with it. Protest leaders are unhappy. More importantly, regardless of that, there is no financial space or, to
Right.
actually execute a lot of this. Like I said, the entire policy establishment of the Sri Lankan ruling class, so to speak, has only believed in one idea, which is go to the IMF. Now, the IMF, of course, notorious for imposing harsh conditions. These conditions, and Ranil might get a loan. The government might get a loan if there is if there are no protests, maybe, or whatever. But this loan is not going to be the end of the issue. It's only going to mark a fresh chapter in the kind of economic woes the people of Sri Lanka are definitely going to face. So, the bigger issue here is that there is, I think, no attempt to sort of look at even a midterm solution, a more sustainable solution as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, because a lot of it has just been bandage and patchwork kind of solutions. Okay, let's go to the IMF. Okay, let's try to get some more aid, and nothing that really looks at what are the underlying reasons for Sri Lanka facing this economic crisis. So, keeping that in mind, nothing really Ranil Wickremesinghe is likely to do is going to really help. Is likely to actually help Sri Lanka's economic crisis. In fact, some of his pronouncements make it a bit. The question is, they make it the prospects of danger are more, because after July 9th, for instance, and a few days after that, he made some references to the protesters being fascists or something, which is the complete opposite of the kind of nature of protest that we have seen in Sri Lanka. So, keeping all these things in mind, difficult to say if he'll actually be able, whether he has any space to move, and more importantly, the willingness to explore new options. Neither of this really seems available. So, in that sense, it is a bit boxed, and we've already discussed this in the past that anybody who comes to power in Sri Lanka at this point would have been in a difficult situation. For all that's the reason some of the opposition may not have been too eager either, because now it's easier to pin all the blame on Ranil Wickremesinghe because he has already taken so much of the blame, rightly so. So, keeping all these things in mind, difficult few, like unfortunately we keep saying on this show quite often, difficult few weeks and months ahead. But right now, I think the biggest question is how will both the sides evaluate, the protesters and the ruling establishment evaluate the situation on the ground and decide on the next steps.
Right, Prashant. The situation not made easy by the fact that he's not a favorite of the protesters.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your time. Crushing heat waves are coursing through Europe, putting off the summertime chill. Greece, France, Spain, Turkey, Italy and Portugal are the worst hit. At 25 degrees Celsius, the UK also recorded its hottest night ever on Monday and Tuesday. The government has warned of daytime peaks in temperatures. As wildfires rage across Western Europe, Italy is turning off its famous water fountains. People are being asked not to wash driveways, and some say tourists should visit Europe in cooler months. Climate watchers are also warning the worst is yet to come. What caused this, and is there a way out? Let's go over to D. Raghunandan from the People's Science Forum. Hi Raghu, welcome to the show. So Raghu, just wanted to start this conversation with a basic question about, do we know whether this is global warming that is causing the heat waves across Europe, or is it just an anomaly?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, this is of course the perennial question, which is known in the science as attribution. That is, can we attribute these heat waves to climate change, or do we have to say, yes, heat waves happen, and we don't know whether this is because of climate change or not? I'll answer this question in two ways. One is that Europe has seen these kinds of heat waves occurring. The last major heat wave was in 2013.
Okay.
But in the last 4 years, have seen very similar extent of heat waves recurring every year. And this year has broken all records, just like the previous year had broken the previous year's record. So what we are seeing is that heat waves are occurring more frequently. They are more severe when they occur, and their probability of occurring is now increasing. That is,
Right.
what used to happen maybe once in a decade or once in a century, events are now becoming annual events. So you can almost say now that Europe can expect such heat waves to be the new normal. And these heat waves may be recurring annual phenomena. Now, this is precisely what climate scientists have been predicting over the past 10 years, that this was going to happen. So the trend conforms to what the science says. The other explanation is that uh, modeling studies by meteorologists, by weather scientists, have shown that these kinds of heat waves cannot be explained other than by human-induced climate change. That
All
is,
right.
there are no weather models which will show you that these are normal, but they are anomalies and they happen once in 10 or 20 years. All the models show that unless you introduce factors related to human-induced climate change, you can't explain these weather phenomena.
Got it, Raghu. So, but they're also running out of water in many countries, especially in Western Europe. So, where did they go wrong?
Yeah. So, in order to explain that, let me just backpedal a little bit to your last question. Climate change, as we should understand it, is not only about rising temperatures. It's also about changing weather patterns, like we have seen. And these are not local weather patterns, but these are global or pan-regional weather and climate factors. What we are seeing now is heat waves which are becoming endemic to the whole of the European continent, stretching from the Mediterranean upwards in the temperate zone, in the mid latitudes. That's a
Right.
large area. And there are many factors of changing weather which are going along with rising temperatures. For example, you are getting what are called two parallel jet streams, which are huge air currents which circle the globe. Now you're getting two of those, which are hot air currents blowing through Europe, which increase the air temperature, which also cause dry air, which
All
cause
right.
the air to become dry. So the air is very dry, which is why you are seeing forest fires all over Europe, because the air is dry, extremely dry. Because you can imagine India is at a lower latitude, but India also has very similar temperatures to that in Europe. In fact, we have a few degrees more, but you're not seeing the range of forest fires in India that you're seeing in Europe. So there's something peculiar that's happening in Europe, and that is these hot air streams, which are making the air drier. That's one. And related to that is soil moisture. The soil does not have moisture anymore because the changing weather patterns has also meant a drying up of the soil and drying up of rivers and streams which irrigate the soil and make it moist. So what would normally happen is that the soil would lose moisture in order to cool down, just like a human body perspires in order to cool down. But the soil has no moisture left to cool. So the soil becomes drier and drier. So we have seen repeated droughts. In southern Europe this year, Italy is going through the worst drought in the past 70 years. The river Po, which irrigates most of southern Italy, has gone dry. Now, if this is a recurring pattern, rivers going dry, streams going dry, soil losing its moisture, clearly this indicates another trend predicted for climate change, which is drying up of the soil and increased evaporation from water bodies, and therefore loss of water. So drought is another new normal. This has been happening in the US. This has been happening now in Southern Europe, especially in Italy, and it's happening in other parts of Europe as well. So this is related to the water shortage that you are talking about. If rivers and streams dry up, you will have this problem. A few years ago, you had the reverse happening in Northern Europe, where rivers and streams flooded because of excess rainfall. But that may happen in a small period of time. Otherwise, you get these drought periods like you're seeing now.
All right, Raghu, thanks very much for that update. It was really detailed, and thanks very much. A court in Turkey, the first country to ratify the Istanbul Convention to prevent and punish violence against women in 2011, has backed the government's last year's decision to walk out of the agreement. The country has a high incidence of violence against women, and the news has drawn alarm in Europe and around the world. It is widely believed conservative elements in Turkey sparked the withdrawal. The Convention Against Violence is seen to discourage traditional family structures. An older statement from Turkey had said the domestic law spun off from the convention was hijacked by those who backed LGBTQIA rights. We'll ask Abdul from People's Dispatch about the implications of this move. Hi, Abdul.
Hi.
Do we know so far why Turkey has made this move, and also what are the implications of it?
Well, last year there was, in March, the decision was taken primarily on the basis of the conservative elements. I think the AKP is primarily a representative of the conservative sections in Turkey. So the conservative sections in Turkey had claimed that the convention and the law emanating from that convention would lead to deterioration of the traditional family values in Turkey.
Okay.
Which are highly anti-women, highly patriarchal, and so on and so forth. They also had claimed, some of them, that this basically encourages divorce, rate of divorce between, of course, the families are breaking up, and of course, the extremist of them would, they had argued that this leads, basically encourages homosexuality and lose, quote unquote, morale. That's what the understanding of the conservative, which is, as of now, is the ruling establishment in Turkey, believed. And of course, under the pressure of the core constituency of his party, Erdogan decided to withdraw from the convention. Now, of course, the feminist movement inside Turkey, the socialist movement, the progressive sections were enraged by this move, and they went to the court.
Right.
There were different cases filed claiming that this is an arbitrary decision, this has no base in constitution, and so on and so forth. Of course, the ruling yesterday has been establishes, of course it's a divided verdict, but if still the majority establishes that what President did is quote unquote constitutionally valid. To basically validate that decision, they have quoted another decree.
Okay.
Issued by the president. So this is a farce basically in order to justify, as some opposition movements are saying, it's a political decision because they do not want to go to their core constituency in the upcoming elections with the same kind of, which will, and they don't want to face them. So that is the basis on which this convention, Turkey withdrew from the convention in last year. And after yesterday's decision, this basically will lead to the further strengthening of the conservative elements within the country.
Right, Abdul. Now, what are the implications for women from this ruling, and also for the gender and sexual minorities?
Of course, it's a great setback. Though Erdogan government claimed that withdrawal from the convention does not mean going back on the women right commitments.
Okay.
In March, Turkish parliament also passed a law which basically criminalizes domestic violence and violence against women and so on and so forth. But that law is quite, you can say, conservative when it comes to what was the commitment under Istanbul Convention. Turkey in particular is seen a resurgence of violence against women. The movements, various movements have compiled the data. If you see the platform called Movement Against Femicide in Turkey records the number of women killed by their family members, by their relatives, by their boyfriends, husbands, in different ways. And it records every year the number has been increasing, particularly after the coming of power of the conservative elements in the government, which has encouraged such violence.
Right.
So, withdrawal from the convention and the limited laws which have been passed, of course, compromises the progressive movements. It compromises women's right, and it basically strengthens the traditional quote-unquote family system in which women are not allowed to kind of exercise their choices, to go out, to be in relationship. Even in a relationship, the protection which was there because of the Istanbul Convention, those protection has been withdrawn because of this latest move, and this will be a big setback for the women's rights movement in the country.
All right, Abdul. Thanks very much for your time. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow, and for more news like this, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org. and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram for updates from around the world.